Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah, as Maulana Asifullah said, we're going to have a panel discussion. So the goal of this is to go through some of the more famous and the more common arguments that are thrown by atheists against Islam. So we have a list of our own. So we have a list of our own that we've put together. We'll go through those, as well as there were some questions from the last session that we didn't answer because we didn't have time for this now. So inshallah, I'll ask some questions from that, and then we'll also go into the list of questions that we have. And throughout the session, if any question comes to mind, then you can go to ask.projectihya.com. It just takes you to a Google form, and you can submit your question anonymously, inshallah. So this is the time, everyone is encouraged. Like this session is, we're going to have a big portion of it for our, the questions that we've already put together. But towards the end, we will have, we'll have the questions that come from the audience, inshallah. So the first question, I'll start with one question that was actually left from the previous session. So the question is that I heard that the Kalam argument, Ilm al-Kalam, has a lot of controversy around it, even with Sunni Islam. Can you speak on that?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. I believe the question is not about Ilm al-Kalam, it's rather Kalam cosmological argument. These are two different things. Kalam cosmological argument is an argument that is discussed in Ilm al-Kalam, whereas Ilm al-Kalam is about science. They both are controversial. But just because something has controversies, it doesn't mean that it is not correct. I was just saying when this question came, that even the Quran has controversies. But does that mean that Quran is invalid? No. Allah has controversies. People are denying God. They're raising questions about Allah. Just because there are certain questions raised about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does it mean that the concept of Allah is wrong? So this idea that this argument has certain controversies, therefore it is incorrect, this is a fallacy in itself. So unless if I come to know any specific controversy, then inshallah, and Maulana Yusuf also spoke on this issue, we will be able to respond. And if there is any other question and a certain problem comes in my mind, inshallah I will respond. Okay. You want to add something? Okay.
I'm not going to be doing a lot of talking, inshallah. I will allow the guests to speak if there's anything to find, inshallah.
So we'll go into the first. We'll go into the first question from the set of questions that we put together. The first question is, what is the scientific evidence for the existence of God?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very common question. But I have to say one thing, and we all have to keep this in mind, inshallah. Science does not have a right to prove or disprove God. This idea that, what is the scientific argument? What is the scientific proof? Science cannot prove anything. It can only give you certain ideas. The reason is that science depends on the argument of induction. It does not prove anything definitively. How does science work? It works on the basis of observation. Someone observes something. On the basis of his observation, he develops a hypothesis. Then after that, certain experiments are done, and finally the theory is developed. But whenever a theory is developed, there is always a room for error. There is always a possibility that will change tomorrow. So if you ask from science that can science prove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it is able to prove, it will prove Allah azza wa jalla on the basis of induction. And induction is a problematic thing. Let me explain why. There is a very famous concept. It's called the problem of black swan. once upon a time in Europe, people used to believe that all swans are white. And that is before colonialism. And they thought that all swans are white on the basis of induction. After that, when they started traveling across the world, in Africa, in Asia, they found out that even some swans are black. So they had to change their position. So whenever you decide something on the basis of induction, there is always a possibility that tomorrow it will change. Therefore, science does not have any argument. It cannot prove or disprove because of its limited scope. Science only talks about the process of the physical objects that we see around us, this universe. It cannot prove anything outside of this universe. Point number one. Point number two, that how can we prove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on rational basis? How can we prove Allah Azza wa Jalla?
Before you move forward, just to make this kind of more of a discussion, to understand myself, right? You're saying for induction, because science is based on the limited observations we have, and that set of observations can grow at any time. So therefore, because we don't have an infinite set of observations, our conclusion cannot be perfect.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say, that our conclusion will never be definitive. It will change. It might change. Okay, there is always an option or possibility of changing the conclusion in the future. So if we depend on science or any scientific argument, it is possible that tomorrow it will turn out to be false. So what we need to look for, logical, rational argument. And I think the most compelling, rational, the most reasonable argument is the Kalam cosmological argument that Maulana Yusuf mentioned earlier, and I would like to add a few points here. But we all know that everything that begins to exist has a cause. And you know, this is not a rocket science. Everybody can understand, even children can understand. You know, my son Ahmed, he's right here. And, you know, can I have him for a minute, inshallah? Come here, Ahmed. So I will ask him a few questions and see if he gets things right. Okay? Stand up here. Stand up here. Okay, Ahmed, so tell me, what do you think that can something come into existence without a cause?
No.
Okay. So what about the universe? Can it be or could it come without any cause?
No.
Okay. Alright, tell me one thing. What about the cause of the universe? Can it be without consciousness?
No.
Does it have to be with consciousness?
Yes.
Can you tell me an example, the difference between conscious cause and unconscious cause?
Conscious cause is when a cause has decision-making power, and an unconscious cause is when a cause has...
And then they also say, hey, if things have enough time, right, over the course of millions and millions of years, or billions of years, things, you know, there's a small chance, but given enough time, anything with a little bit of chance can exist. So, what would you
Right,
say?
so I think it was already answered that anything in certain time can exist. It means it will exist on its own, right? Can anything exist on its own? If it can, so the effect and the cause will be the same thing. And that's a logical fallacy. One thing cannot be the cause of itself. It's impossible.
So do you want to add anything?
There's only one thing that coming back to the first thing that Mufti mentioned about the question itself. What is the scientific evidence for God? So that already shows that the new atheists are winning because they're making us think on the scientific paradigm, scientization. The question should be, what is the evidence for God? Not against it, just asking a question, right? Let's think of something else other than God. Somebody asks you, what is the scientific evidence for the existence of Alexander the Great? You can't answer that question. Because you can't prove the existence of Alexander the Great through scientific evidence. So let's keep this theologically neutral. There are many, many things that you do not believe in, nor do you, or us, any of us, believe in based on science. Your mother being your mom is not based, you believe your mom is your mom, your mother is your mother, your father is your father. It's not based on science. It's based on a different type of knowledge. It's based on a different source of epistemology, as we were discussing earlier. So science is not the only way to knowledge. There's many, many other ways that we use on a day-to-day basis.
So a follow-up question. Scientists have posited the plausibility of the multiverse that also explains the existence of the universe. Is this a factual assessment, or have they unscientifically given the multiverse godlike attributes?
Yeah, the theory of multiverse theory is not even an established theory yet, but even if it becomes established, suppose there is another universe, and suppose that was the cause of this universe, then the same question will be asked about that universe. That what is the cause of that universe? And if you come up with another universe and you present it as a cause of that universe, and then you can just keep going on and on forever, and it will lead to infinite regress. And then you can just keep going on and on forever, and it will lead to infinite regress. And infinite regress is impossible. So there has to have a beginning, as this, Ahmed responded, that it will lead to a domino effect. For our existence, there has to be some sort of beginning. If there is no beginning, our existence is impossible. I always give an example, and it's suitable to atheists, not Muslims, not people of morality. Okay, it's suitable to those who draw their own morality, which is completely, a model of immorality. The example is that imagine if you have a girlfriend and you ask her, would you marry me? And she says, well, I can consider, but let me just ask around. Let me ask my mom. Let me ask my father. Though she's not going to do that, but just hypothetically speaking. So she goes and she asks her mom. And the mom says, yeah, when your dad will come home, we'll ask him. The dad comes home and he says, yeah, I have to ask my brother. And the brother is approached. And then you just keep going on and on and on forever. So I always say to these atheists, bro, you're not going to get married, ever. There has to be somewhere that somebody says, yes, I'm not going to ask anyone else. Yes, that yes has to be there. The beginning has to be there. Then finally the mom will agree. And then the girlfriend will say, yes, and now you can get married. So even in our day-to-day example, we can understand that a beginning is must. So for our existence, the beginning of existence is must. So the multiverse theory doesn't support them at all.
We'll go to the next point. There's a lot of pain, suffering, and evil in this world. Why would Allah allow all of this to exist?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and a lot of people I've noticed have become atheists or agnostics because of this thing. It's called the problem of evil. They say that, oh, there is a lot of pain, a lot of suffering in the world. Why is God, who is Rahman, merciful, and who is Al-Qadir, omnipotent, is allowing that? Either he's not merciful or he's not Qadir. Because if he's Qadir, then he could easily control it. So it looks like he's not merciful. But he's merciful, yet he's not controlling, that means he's not Qadir. It's a big problem. And I answer these questions in two ways. The first answer to this question is that when we raise objection about the qudra or the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do many times this cherry picking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has many characteristics. One of them is Ar-Rahman, Al-Qadir, Al-Ghaffar, Al-Qahhar, Al-Alim, Al-Hakim. Why are we ignoring all those characteristics? Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Hakim, all-wise. Al-Alim, all-knowing. What is the meaning of Al-Hakim? Meaning, He has unlimited number of wisdoms. Al-Alim, He has unlimited amount of knowledge. When we say unlimited, it means the limited capacity of our brain cannot understand that. Limited capacity of our brain cannot digest that. It's impossible. That's because it is unlimited. So if you claim that I must know why God is allowing this suffering, I must know that why Allah is allowing this pain, I must know. It means you're claiming that you are equal to God because you have to know all His wisdoms and you want to have all his knowledge, which you will never be able to do so. So there are many things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, and there is no way we can understand that. There is no way we can learn that. However, when we learn that, when we understand that, it makes sense. For example, imagine if time travel is possible, and you are given a chance to travel back in history and you find Hitler as a child. What will you do? You will let him grow up? What will you say? Oh, mashallah, good job. You're not going to do that. You make sure that he doesn't grow up, and you will think that it is moral to kill him right away, because you know the future. It makes sense. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is Al-Hakim, who is Al-Alim, He does so many things that there is no way we can understand the reason, the wisdom behind those actions. So if there is suffering, if there is pain, there can be a better hikmah that we know we cannot understand, and the reason why we don't understand is rational. That's the first response. The second response is, can you achieve anything in this world without pain? Without effort? Anything. Even if you have to lose weight, you have to put yourself on diet. It's painful. Anything that you want to achieve, a higher status, good job, good education, you have to do some efforts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us that if we want a higher status in Jannah, we have to go through some pain. There will be suffering, and we have to show patience. Because Allah Azza wa Jal did not make or did not declare this dunya as Darul Na'im. This is not Jannah. The law of Jannah is that you will achieve without any effort, without any pain and suffering. The law of this world is that you have khair and you have shar. If you become dominant over shar by producing khair, you have reserved your seat in Jannah. But if you fail, then no Jannah for you. Let me give you an example for that. Imagine if I'm a teacher and I give you an exam and a question, multiple choice. There is a question, it has 4 options. All 4 options are correct. You choose whichever option you like, you're getting full score. So that's how, suppose there are 100 questions like that, what will be your total score? 100%. You are forced to make that score. You are forced to be successful in your exam. Where is your free will? It's gone. The 3 options out of 4 have to be wrong, and 1 has to be right. So that using your free will, you choose the right one. And then once you complete your exam, you claim that Alhamdulillah, I am now successful. Why? Because you chose the right answer using your free will. If we had no pain and no suffering in this dunya, in this world, there would be no free will, and we have free will. That's why pain and suffering is must.
Also, I'd like to read a quote that I read. So it said that the existence of evil itself proves that God exists. And this is the quote: evil is itself evidence for the existence of God. First, this is suggested by the character of evil. Evil is a departure from the way that things ought to be. But it could not be a departure from the way things ought to be unless there is a way that things ought to be. If there is a way that things ought to be, then there's a design plan for how things ought to be. And if there is such a design plan, then there must be a design. Great. That was also pretty interesting. Yusuf, do you want to add anything? Well, I want to actually do a follow-up from one of the questions that came up. So the question was, Assalamu alaikum, I don't see much emphasis on teaching children or adults Asma'ul Husna. Without knowing the names of Allah with meaning, how are we planning to strengthen faith in the oneness of Allah and fight faithfully?
I feel bad that I'm the one talking, so, Martin, you should, inshallah, you want to respond to this. It's actually related to your topic.
Well, mashallah gave a full, thorough answer to that question. Every single way that could be objected to, we answered it, mashallah. But as for this, again, it comes back to the point of education, right? If we don't have an emphasis on teaching our young people, right, then of course all these gaps are going to be there. Whether it's this, whether it's Quran, whether it's Tafsir, or the Hadith, there's gaps everywhere because there isn't an emphasis on religious education. Many of us grew up in the West, many of us grew up in the high school, college environment of the West. Therefore, we have an appreciation for knowledge where we find it. But the future, and the future of the Ummah in the West, lies in the fact that we maintain our education, whether it is the basics of Aqidah, basics of fiqh, basics of hadith, Islam al-Husna. All this is important, like many people have brought up. But that starts with parents first, inculcating within the children the love of ilm, and then the young people going and spending their time learning ilm. Not everyone is meant to be an alim, not everyone is meant to spend 7-8 years studying. But there are programs that are being offered on a part-time basis, full-time basis, evening basis. And if we are not advocates for it, then we will have many, many gaps in ilm. And coming back to his question of Islam al-Husna, that's important, right? As Mufti Sahib was mentioning, this problem of evil comes from an utter ignorance of the other qualities of Allah Azza wa Jalla. We never once, in our Sharia, the Prophet ﷺ never once told us that Allah is only Rahim. No, Allah is Shadidul Iqab too. Allah Azza wa Jalla is Maliki Yawmiddin. Allah Azza wa Jalla is Hakim. These are His other qualities that are mentioned throughout the Quran. We don't even need to necessarily go through a specific book of Asma al-Husna. If you read the Quran, when we spend time with the Quran and spend time with the ulama who teach tafsir, we will have knowledge of these different asma, these different qualities and attributes of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And again, when we come back to ilm al-kalam, what is the first thing we do? We learn about Allah and His attributes. We learn about Allah, His oneness. We learn that He is dissimilar to creation. We learn that He has complete power. We learn that He is hikmah, He has ilm, He has irada. There is so much going on there. But it comes back to us learning and teaching our family members and our young ones the ilm that's out there.
Jazakallah khairan. So we'll go to the next question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to marry al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha at 9 years old. Is this not wrong given that it contradicts modern ethical norms? And is it true what some say that she was actually 18?
Yeah, it's a very popular question. Islamophobes love it. So, the second part of the question is that is it true that Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha was 18 when consummation of marriage happened? No, it's not true at all. Some people, you will find some people that they have adopted this position, but this position has no strong principles. It reflects their apologetic behavior. They're too apologetic. Oh my God, Rasulullah got married to a 6-year-old, so let's increase her age and make her 16 at the time of marriage. And at the time of consummation of marriage, let's find out if we can have some clues that she was 18 or 19. It's nothing but apologetic behavior, and I really don't like that. There are Sahih hadith. Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha herself is saying that when I got married to Rasulullah I was 6. At the time of consummation of marriage, I was 9. When Rasulullah passed away, I was 18. So they say, yeah, the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, we get it. You know this guy, his name is Hisham. Hisham is the problem here. Okay, when did he turn out to be da'if? Oh, that's because when he went to Iraq, he forgot everything. He forgot everything. He became mudallis, he became muhtalit, he became da'if. And some people just unnecessarily, they criticize Hisham ibn Urwa, rahimahullah. So it is not in line with the principles of hadith, and we can go on this topic, but I just want to emphasize this point. That there is not one hadith. There are a number of hadiths that are not even narrated by Hisham. They are narrated by other Sahaba, other Tabi'in. And they are not even narrated by Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha herself. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Amr radiyallahu anhu. These Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they narrated that Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu anha was 6 at the time of her marriage. Okay, maybe Sayyidah Aisha forgot. Hypothetically speaking, Sayyidah Aisha forgot about her age. But everybody forgot in Medina about her age? How is it possible? So that's why the second position, I not only disagree with this, but I think it is not right. It is incorrect. The second point is that, is it okay, according to the modern morality, obviously it is not right that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got married to a 6-year-old. But we ask one question to those people who have a problem with this, that child sexual behavior is wrong but the question is that is it conditionally wrong or categorically wrong? If it is categorically wrong, then you have to believe that there are categorical evils exist in the society. The modernists, the liberals, the homosexuals, the evolutionists, they don't believe in anything that is evil categorically. Why? Because morality is subjective to them. Objective morality to them doesn't exist. When we say that homosexuality is intrinsically wrong, they say it is dogma. Why? Because nothing objectively immoral that exists. So when we say that homosexuality is wrong, they accuse us of being dogmatic. But when it comes to the age of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, they pretty quick become dogmatic and they say that child sexual behavior is categorically immoral. So according to their philosophy, according to their understanding, according to their epistemology, it is not possible that child sexual behavior is categorically immoral. Yes, it can be conditionally immoral, conditionally bad. What are those conditions that can make child marriage or child sexual behavior bad? Maybe two things, two conditions. The first condition is loss of innocence. Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha was very young, or a child who gets married now, for example, at the age of 6 or 7 or 8, she's very young, she will lose her innocence at a very early age, and that is a big problem. But we ask these people a question. The question is that, what do you care about children's innocence? You are destroying their innocence day and night, and they are actually promoting curriculums in schools that is taking away their innocence. Our children go to schools, and this is the garbage that they're learning there. This is what they're promoting on social media and media. And let me quote two things here. So there is a post there's a news in the Washington Post, and I'm just reading the headline. It says that 1 in 4 teens are sexting. A new study shows, and then it says, relax. These researchers say it is mostly normal. You understand sexting? It's a new term. So there are people, teens, who take their nude pictures and they text to other people. So 1 in every 4, and the age group is from 12 to 18. They're all minors. And these people in the Washington Post, they're saying it's normal. And the article says that the parents should provide safe environments so that their children can do proper sexting. There is another news that I would like to read. Is from Daily Mail. It says, I quote, "Let them be children. Sex expert claims that masturbation should be taught to pupils as young as 8. These people, they talk about innocence. They don't even understand the meaning of innocence. So, and then they ask questions about the age of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha. You should ask them, how dare you? First few fix your problems. The second problem, the second condition is that can make a child's sexual behavior is immoral. The second condition is psychological harm. But what is psychological harm? Psychological harm means that if something is perceived to be wrong in the society, in the community, and a child does that, and he's shamed in the school, so that can affect him psychologically. But remember one thing, we're talking about an incident that took place 1444 years ago. And at that time, children marriage was very common. Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha was never mocked. Nobody made fun of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha. Oh look, she got married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he is 54 and she is 60. Nobody did that. So it is impossible for her to be affected psychologically. So these are the only two problems, and these two problems don't exist in the case of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha. And on top of that, at the time of the consummation of marriage, she was baligha. She was baligha. The problem is that the definitions of bulugh change in our time. Today, people say that adult is when you turn 18. That's when you're declared an adult. Islamic definition of adulthood is different. When a girl starts having her monthly cycle, she's an adult. But the hypocrisy and the inconsistency of this society is that if you go to the state of Massachusetts, over there in that state, a girl is allowed to get married at the age of 12 with parental consent in this country right now. So Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, when she went to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, she was 9, 1400 years ago, and she did it with parental consent. It's not like she just went and she got married to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam on her own. The parental consent was there. So if it is subjectively immoral, then it can never be declared wrong. And if it is objectively immoral, then you have to admit that you believe in objective morality. And the day you prove and you admit that objective morality exists, your game of atheism is over. Sure.
Also, just rhetorically, he explained it, academically, rhetorically, nothing magical happens at 18 that now they're ready for marriage, or 15, or 13. This is an arbitrary number set by society based on a lot of different factors, that they now need to go to school, now it's time for their high school, now it's time for their college. If you cancel out all of that, why on earth would a girl who hits bulugh in that pre-modern Arabia in 1400s in the century, 1400 years ago, why would she wait from 12 all the way to 30 like they do in this country to get married? That's a waste of her youth. Whereas in this country, they have a whole bunch of other things they need to do before they become adults. Where in that society, the most productive thing for them to do after hitting puberty was to now get married and to now bear children, and she was able to bear children. The only real rule in Islam is the issue of harm. We say that there shouldn't be harm. And once she's baligha, her schooling isn't going to, in a society where her schooling is not going to be affected, none of that is going to be affected. And especially ulama in the past, they would also explain that adulthood was reached earlier in those times. The climate, the food, just the general idea, the society, the way they thought. All of that plays a role in how societies then fix the age of. That's why when we look just in the recent past of this country, and as Mufti Saab mentioned, even in some states now, the age of consent is actually very low still. So inshallah, just to keep that in mind.
And I'll also add one thing here. For the non-Muslims, the issue of fulfilling their sexual desires and the issue of marriage, these two are not connected. Right? There is no connection. You can get married at 50 or you can never get married, and it won't have any impact of you being able to fulfill your sexual desires. But for a Muslim, these two are completely co-joined. So you cannot have one without the other. So that's why their societies are built around, they don't have a problem moving the age of, consent, self-consent to 18, or even it could be 25 or 30, because they still have an outlet, right? They have zina. But for Muslims, a Muslim society, and if we look historically, any society that valued the institution of marriage, they built their society around, around the age of marriage being very young, right? So, and also it's in the interest of a woman, because there's studies that show that 90% of her eggs are finished by the age of 30. And by the age of 40 or so, the more you wait, the less that window is, the biological clock. So Islam actually is in favor of women maximizing that window and using the majority of their life for the thing which is going to be the most impactful to their happiness.
Yeah, I would like to add one more thing. Speaking of consent, they say that if a girl at that age she gets married, she would not have consent. But it's so inconsistent. This concept of consent is so inconsistent. And I can prove its inconsistency with an example. We live in this country, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me that men have a desire to have multiple wives. Now, the question is, hypothetically speaking, there are 4 women.
And actually, before you complete complete this, the next question is, why does Islam allow polygyny and slavery? So maybe...
Okay, well, let me answer this. This is important. So there are 4 women, 1 man. 5 of these people, they all agree on marriage. That these 4 women will get married to this man. Full consent. They're all adult. Now, this liberal society, the Western law, will it permit? The consent is there. It will not allow you to have the second wife, even with consent of your previous wife, your first wife. Everybody is fully happy. They want to have this happy life all their life. But the Western law would not allow that. Where is the concept of consent now? So it has a lot of inconsistencies, and this is how you can easily dismantle this Western ideology by proving inconsistencies in it.
So going into the next question, why does Islam allow polygyny and slavery, and basically aren't these things moral evils? You kind of talking about categorical evils, annihilation, a lot of this.
Okay. Yeah, I think
especially
slavery is very important, and let's talk about that inshallah. Okay, so they used to be, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 3 types of slavery. The first type of slavery was that a man was traveling, and he was traveling by a tribe. These tribe men, they saw him and they abducted him and they enslaved him. And now this guy will become a slave. So people would travel, and many times they would not come back. And their relatives would find out that, oh, our son, our brother, our cousin, he had become a slave by such and such tribe. This was the first type of slavery. It was common in Arabia. And then the relatives would actually make the payment to those people to buy their relatives back. It was very common. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam issued Emancipation Declaration, right? Just like it was issued here in 1861, I believe. So what was this Emancipation Declaration? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ثَلَاثَةٌ أَنَا خَصْمُهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. There are 3 people, I will be their opponent on the Day of Judgment. The second person in this hadith is رَجُلٌ بَاعَ حُرًّا فَأَكَلَ ثَمَنَهُ. A man who abducted another person and he sold him in the market and he consumed that money. I will be his opponent on the Day of Judgment in the court of Allah. Imagine Rasulullah ﷺ, whose intercession we are all hoping and making dua, and on the Day of Judgment it turns out that he is opposing this individual. Forget about intercession and shafa'ah, he's opposing. So this type of slavery was demolished right away, was terminated right away. The second type of slavery that was terminated, but gradually, it was the slaves and the children of the slaves, the grandchildren of the slaves. And they were in a large number in Arabian society, just like in America. There were many people who were slaves in the past, and they were the children and the grandchildren of slaves. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that if we declare all of them to be free overnight, then the entire society will stop economically, financially right away. Therefore, gradual process is important here. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayah, فَكُّ رَقَبَةً, that free slaves. So gradually, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on many different occasions said, if you make this mistake, free a slave. If you make that mistake, free a slave. And these types of slaves were finally, all of them were free by the time of Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiyallahu anhu alone freed 30,000 slaves. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam freed 63 slaves. So Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam set an example, and Sahaba radiyallahu anhum would they would practice it every day. That's how they were able to free 30,000 slaves. So this is the second type of slavery, and gradually was terminated. The third type of slavery was never terminated. It's a slavery that is a result of war captives. There are 4 options if there is a war between an Islamic Khilafah and the Kafir state. And it's a religious war. So there are four options. What would happen to those war captives? One option is mentioned in Surah Muhammad. The three are mentioned in a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also in some places in the Quran. The first option is jizya. The first option is jizya, that they would pay jizya and they can live peacefully wherever they want within the Muslim territory. If Muslims, so the Muslim government thinks that these people, if they pay jizya, they can still be a threat to the society, to the country, because they're terrorists. They're terrorists. So what will happen? The second option is qatl, death penalty. Death penalty is the second option. Third option, imma manna wa imma fida'a. Third option is that if the Muslim ruler, he thinks that it is better that we release them. In exchange of their release, we can demand some money, or we can actually enforce the war captives exchange program. So we'll send them back, and if they are war captives, Muslim war captives on the other side, we can get them back. This is imma manna wa imma fida'a. That's the third option. The fourth option is slavery. The reason why this option was not abrogated completely, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam alone, Islam alone could not do it. The reason is that the whole society was practicing it. Whenever there would be a war captives would be enslaved. Imagine if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had terminated this third type of slavery, then many Muslims would become slaves by the hand of the kuffar. But when the kuffar would become war captives in the Muslim land, they would not be able to enslave them. The wars are fought on the usul, on the principle of tit for tat. If you are enslaving our people, we'll enslave your people. That's why this window was left open until the world came to this realization that slavery is bad, and even the war captives should not be enslaved. Muslims would be the first one. They were the first one to respond, and he said, we don't like slavery. If everybody is agreeing that no more slavery, so no more slavery. Slavery is not fard, slavery is not wajib, but it was allowed for this reason because the whole world was practicing. But the whole world was not ready to terminate the first type of slavery or the second type of slavery. It was Islam, it was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who terminated those two types of slavery. The world was not ready for it.
So a couple of questions on this point. So the first you mentioned, what was the first type of slavery?
Is that a person is abducted and then he's enslaved.
Yeah, abducted, and the second one was just
children of the slaves.
Okay, children of the slaves. So those two were basically slavery that existed because of an old system of injustice.
Yes.
So that I understand that Islam would declare emancipation proclamation. For the third type of slavery, is that not, just to play devil's advocate a bit, why is it that when people argue, for the age of Aisha, that's being apologetic, but this here is not being apologetic? Like, why is this not being apologetic? Could we not see, because Islam never declared slavery as an inherent evil, right? In the third way, where there's prisoners of war. So why isn't that you say that, okay, Muslims were the first ones to say that, this is evil, so we're the first ones to go? Because Allah allowed it for 1400 years, it was going. So could we not say that, hey, there is some good that could result from this, and we should not, what would you respond to this?
Well, my response is that these two things are not equal. The age of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, the concept of slavery. The reason is that the concept of slavery, in its most literal form, opposes the concept of Tawheed. The reason is that Islam is here so that people become the slaves of Allah, not the slaves of people. Islam is here to bring them out of the slavery of people, and so that they become slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Islam wants that the slavery is over. It's not practiced. But it was kept in practice because of this reason that other people were practicing. And I don't think it's an apologetic response. The reason why it is not, because we have clear evidences. Imagine if we never had any evidence, and we would just say, yeah, Islam abolished slavery, and then it would be an apologetic response. But we have an ayah of the Quran, we have a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the whole concept of Tawheed. So it cannot be apologetic.
So you're saying because there's ayat of Quran and hadith that tell us to free slaves, that's an indication that Islam believes that the institution of slavery should be abolished. So I'll give you another question for that. Because Islam also says to give sadaqah and spend in the path of Allah, does that mean that Islam says the institution of personal property should be abolished?
No, at the same time, Islam not only allows, rather encourages to have personal property. Islam does not encourage to have slaves. There is not a single ayah, not a single hadith. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in the Quran that if you want to have money, لا تأخذوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض. So you want to earn money, don't earn through haram means, through batil means. إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض. Unless if it's by consensual trade, then you can earn. So Islam not only allows but encourages to have personal property. So these are two different things.
Okay. You want to add anything? You want to add anything?
Also, the crowd, if they want to
Yes.
ask questions as well as for the sisters. So we'll take one from the crowd and the sisters.
I think we'll now go into the questions. So I did, add some from the sister side. I'll add a couple more, and then we'll go to the brothers. There's a lot of questions, mashallah. We have 16 questions. I'll just get into some that are the most common. So one is that many atheists deny religion because of the topic of homosexuality. Having said this, does Allah naturally create people to be homosexual, or is it cultural and societal norms that influence people to become homosexual?
You should get this problematic question. You should be somehow controversial.
Before getting to the specifics of that question, regardless if it's something that's natural, that Allah has made within us, or something due to a societal factor, which I personally find to the latter, but regardless of that fact, that doesn't remove the inherent evil within it, because Allah has already obliged to us. Let me give you a simple example, which you guys can all probably relate to, or anyone can relate to. A person might have a natural, and not might have, we all have a natural inclination to the opposite gender. But you cannot do whatever you want with the opposite gender. Now, does that make it automatically okay? Even if, ala sabil al-taslim, we agree, sure, homosexuality is something natural that is created within people, that doesn't automatically mean that now it becomes permissible. Because we have a natural inclination towards wrong things, right? Huffatil jannat bil makari. Jannah is literally wrapped and enshrouded with those things that which are disliked. And Jahannam is wrapped with those things that we like. We have natural inclinations to do wrong things. That doesn't necessitate meaning that it should be permissible. There's not going to be a test if all the good things are we want to do and all the bad things we don't want to do. So that's the way I go back to that question. That specific question is something that Allah Azza wa Jalla made within us, or this is something that's a societal factor. Again, me personally, I would align towards the latter, that is due to societal factors. And even if someone has some sort of inclination, that's a specific test that Allah is putting through. If Allah puts somebody through that test, that person can pass that test.
Yeah, every illness is a test, right? It's just a mental illness. I don't know why people don't say this. We have to be very open about it. It's a mental disorder. And the worshippers of science yet to discover the biological reason of homosexuality. There is no gay genes yet. So those people who worship science and they demand scientific proof for this and for that. What is the scientific proof for wudu and for ghusl and for istinja? When it comes to homosexuality, there is no scientific proof. Oh, it's just my emotion. This is double standard. So a guy, the day before yesterday, I think I tweeted about this and I made this statement. So there was a guy who said that, do you ever demand a scientific or biological reason for chewing gum? So I said, well, if chewing gum is a behavior that you identify yourself as, then yes, you need a biological reason for that, based on your epistemology, not on mine. I don't have to have biological reasons for doing anything, okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me, therefore, I do things. He asked me a counter question, what is your biological reason of being Sunni? I said, nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to follow the Quran, to follow the Sunnah, to follow, and the Rasul commanded me to follow the ways of Sahaba. That's why I'm Sunni. It doesn't really matter to me. Based on the worshippers of science, they need to find out the biological reason for any behavior that they associate themselves to. So it's a whole conspiracy and it's a whole scam. Okay, people who sincerely study psychology can attest to that. That science cannot prove and cannot provide any scientific justification for this so far. And even if it comes out to be, because we don't worship science, they do. Even if it comes out to be, then the answer is what Maulana Yusuf just said.
So I'll do a couple more from the list. What is the correct? Okay, yeah, that's good. So does anyone have any questions? You can just stand up and ask. Yes.
So, how would you answer the question if somebody says, why did God create me? I didn't ask to be created, so I'm going to live my life however I like. And then when I die, we'll see what happens. So, besides giving them the answer that if you die, you'll be more upset seeing that, there's a hereafter versus, you thinking that you died and that's it. How would you answer that kind of a question?
So I'll repeat the question. The question is that, how do you answer people who say that I didn't ask to be created? So because I wasn't asked, I'll live my life as I please. So that's the question.
I mean, the first response, and it's not directed towards you, it's directed toward the contender, is that why does God need your permission? That's the first response, right? Why would God ever need your permission if He has complete will, complete volition, complete power, complete qudra, complete ilm, complete hikmah? If He decides to create something, first of all, you and I have no regard and no reason to question Him, right? Secondly, the second question within your first question is purpose of existence, right? That why am I here? And this is a question that we should all be asking. It's a fundamental question that we cannot ignore. At some level, we try to answer that. And if we don't answer that, we're ignoring a very important question. Why am I here? We're going to ask that question. Let me give you an example. You wake up one day, you go to work, walk to school, suddenly you wake up first class on a plane. You look outside the window, you see amazing, amazing views. You got all the amenities in front of you. You got a TV, you got your Xbox, you have food, 5-course meal. If you're a sane, rational human being, you're going to ask, what am I doing here? How did I get here? Where am I? You're not going to care about all this in front of you, right? So now that you're here, now that you're on that plane, you're going to ask, why am I here? Where am I going? So since you did not decide to be created, you realize you were put in that plane, you realize you were put in this world, you're going to ask, why am I here? There must be a reason for me being here. There must be a reason for what I'm doing. Those are natural questions. So you can either seek to ignore that. Like, you know what, I'm just going to ignore that I'm on a plane, I got abducted, put on a first class plane. I don't know where I'm going. I can ignore that, enjoy the luxuries of this 2 hours on this plane, and then whatever happens to me, which is not the most rational choice. If we claim to be rational human beings, the first question we're going to seek to answer is, why am I here? Or I can try to figure out, okay, why did I get here? Where am I going? Where am I going after life? What am I doing after life? So if you have already succumbed or accepted the fact that I'm created, I've been put here, you're going to want to answer, what's my purpose here? Where am I going?
Good job. So here's a question from the sisters. What is the way to counter the secular rhetoric in colleges, the slow poisoning done by the secular colleges seeping gradually into the psyche of our youth? It makes them question everything. How to counter that as a parent of a college student?
Yeah, it's another very important question, and I think the only answer, it was given earlier. Educate yourself and educate your children. Make sure that they are in the right sohbah, in the right company. And teach them from their childhood that they always remain skeptic towards the secularization of the society, modern sciences, and everything they see around them. The problem is that we start questioning about Allah, about Deen, about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, different ahkam of Islam, but we never question, or our children never question about things that they see outside, in their schools, in their colleges. They think that whatever is happening in the society is pretty normal. So there's no point of talking about it. So the question should be asked about what's happening in the society, what's being taught in colleges and universities. But it's happening the other way. And that is because of lack of education. As parents, as imams, as ulama, as community leaders, we have to educate ourselves, and then we start thinking about our children, we start educating our children. Someone was asking this question earlier, that how can we learn these argument of deduction? I think someone was, he asked you earlier? Yes. So we just saw an example, alhamdulillah, many times at our dinner table. We have this conversation, myself and my son Ahmed, we talk about different things. And that's the reason why he can understand these things. Any child can understand that. And if children can understand that, then adults can understand easily. It's just that how much time you invest, how much time you spend, and what is your relation with your children. That's the most important thing.
Well, I kind of just wanted to add a point. I should have done it before this question came up, on the question about God didn't ask me if I wanted to be created, but now, since I'm here, I'm just going to do what I want and then we'll deal with it later. That's basically a question of authority. So it's when there's authority, they don't necessarily need your permission. Why do you follow the laws of this country? You don't say that for the laws of this country, right? Because you accept it as an authority. God is the ultimate authority. He doesn't need anyone's input. So just like we follow the law even if we don't agree with it, in the same manner we have to follow the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if we don't agree with it. We don't have a choice.
And just the fact,
Or we didn't agree with being created, that is.
and just the fact that the person continues to live their life, even if they didn't consent initially, it is kind of an acceptance of consent. And someone can make the argument that no, it's the pain of suicide that actually stops the person. But now you have sleeping pods and all these medicines and all these ways that a person can go painlessly. So
go to Oregon.
Huh?
It's legal in Oregon.
Yeah. So the fact that people, that most people don't. It's not to make a joke of this or anything, but the fact that people live, they continue living, and that means it shows that their life is worth living. Like, for example, someone gives you something, and then they just like put $100. You go to the parties and the auntie or the uncle, they put $100 in your pocket. So you don't say, hey, you didn't ask my consent, take it back. The fact that you just walk away with it, just smile and whatnot, it just shows that you think this is worth it, right?
If suppose, hypothetically speaking, God doesn't exist, do these people ask the same question from their parents?
Yeah.
I mean,
They do.
well, no, they never say that. Where is my consent?
Yeah.
They were not therefore giving consent at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the question of consent would not be there in the case of, if they're asking the same question from their parents.
Just the last point on this. You weren't alive to be given the choice of consent anyway. That is like where you were created. So how are you going to have the ability to give consent before that? It's not possible.
So I'll actually take one more question here because I feel this is pretty important. The question is that, or the statement really, objective morality can be based on principles such as the principle of harm reduction, which can be researched objectively. I think that's a very good question.
The harm principle?
Yes.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
The statement is objective morality, like it's an objection that you mentioned that objective morality, once they accept it, that the atheism is finished. So they're saying that objective morality can be based on principles such as the principle of harm reduction, which can be researched objectively.
Okay. The harm principle is believed to be one of the principles of liberalism. And liberals and atheists, they decide their morality on the basis of, what is harm and what is beneficial. But there are many things that are not harmful, yet they are considered immoral. For example, and it's a very nasty one, that imagine if there is a dead woman and a person goes and does intercourse with her dead body. She's not going to be harmed in any ways. She's dead. But is it moral? So I don't think any human with right mind can justify this and can say, well, it's fine. Okay, there is no harm here. So without being harmful, certain things can still be moral or immoral. Another example is worse than this. You know, this guy has an objection, so I skip that. Okay.
Yeah, and also the harm principle itself is extremely subjective. So maybe you can research objectively, but your conclusions are going to end up being subjective. Let's say that you're buying a gift. Okay, you buy a gift made out of leather for your significant other, for your parents, somebody. So that's good. That's something good. There's no harm there. But the people who toil to make that leather boot in some third world country, they're going through a lot of harm. Well, think of Jeff Bezos. He's making millions of dollars, right? But at the cost of hundreds and thousands of other people. So where do you draw the line of whose harm do you consider? Are we considering the good and the harm of Western society while ignoring the rest of the world? And so it's very, very subjective. You cannot base morality on the harm principle because whose harm are you going to consider? We're only considering the privileged West. We're not considering everyone else in the world. Every time we have some good commodity around us, it's at the cost of somebody else. It really is at the cost of somebody else. So on what basis? And also, how do you categorize and value good? Like, how do you know this is 10% good versus this is 20% good? Right? We can have a debate. We can discuss on one thing, hey, this is good. Somebody's going to this is very good. Somebody's this is bad. Somebody's going to very bad. On what basis are you going to now base your principle of harm upon? It's going to be an infinite recurse.
Yeah. And even the principle of harm, that is something subjective. It's because you cannot have an objective morality based on something subjective. So it's not necessary that everybody agrees on the principle of harm. So something objective morality has to be based on something that objectively exists, or something which is concrete, like the existence of Allah, who concretely exists and then tells us what is right.
It all depends on what paradigm you follow, and the paradigm depends on three things: morality, epistemology, and ontology. So when you have your paradigm, then you can decide, okay, this is harmful and this is not harmful. But the whole world, the entire mankind is following the same paradigm. That is not correct.
So inshallah, we'll take a question from the audience. Yes.
So we understand how to explain. Like,
You want to come up and ask on the mic so that they can...
Huh?
Okay. Sometimes it's very long and it's hard to do. Go
No,
ahead.
so we kind of understand how to explain the situation of Aisha radiallahu anha, marrying Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at a young age, right? We know how to explain it to non-Muslim Juvia, but how do we explain it to our children? Yeah, they're already Muslims, our children. How do we explain to them, kid, this is, this was like that, and do you understand what I'm kind of saying?
So how
In
do
the
we-
same way, you can perhaps give an example of your great-great-grandmother. So perhaps she was, when she got married, she was 13, 14. My great-great-grandmother, she got only 14. She was 14 when she got married. Okay, it was pretty common. Just go 2-3 generations back, and you can, you can pretty much share this with your children. That this is how it used to be. It used to be practiced everywhere in all societies, in all communities, in the East and the West. So it was that common. Just because something is not common anymore, it doesn't become immoral. Okay, this is what you need to convince your children with. That's it.
So here's another question from the sisters. Based on or doesn't Islam encourage concubinage?
Okay, I think it's related to slavery.
Yes, and also there's another question kind of like are these slaves from war? So it's just kind of maybe very simple.
Yeah, these slaves are from wars, and the concept of concubinage exists in Islam. It's mentioned in the Quran, and Islamophobes use a wrong term for concubinage. They say sex slaves. That is not the right term. The right term is concubines. And the reason why it was allowed Well, it has the same reason, because the world was practicing it. But in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added a very, very important point. He mentioned a very important point, and that is in Surah Al-Nur, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ, make them mukatab. What does that mean? Mukatab is a slave who purchases his freedom or her freedom. That person is called mukatab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when these slaves, war slaves, they come to you and you give them an option to become mukatab, so they have to make the payment to the state or to the owner, and after making that specific money, that payment, they can be free. Now imagine the situation is that there is a woman who has become enslaved, and now she has an option. Whether you can pay $10,000 and you can be free, or you can choose to remain slave of this master. So she has both options, and she gives consent that I cannot pay $10,000, I cannot pay $5,000, therefore I choose to become slave. So consent is there in the case of concubinage. Now the issue is that how would she pay $10,000? She's a slave. She doesn't know, how to make money in Islamic state in a foreign land. So in zakat, there are 8 categories. One of those categories is wafir riqab. Wafir riqab means that you give zakat money to free slaves. If they are mukatab, you help them so that they can purchase their freedom. So there are ways that if these slaves are aware of, they can easily be free next day. In fact, it happened, Sayyida Juwayriya bint al-Haris, radiyallahu anha, she was a war captive, and a sahabi, she was in the possession of a sahabi. She came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and she said, Ya Rasulullah, I told that person that I want to become a mukatab. Therefore, I will make the payment and I will be free. But I don't have money. Will you help me? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, yes, of course I can help you. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam knew about her that she was the daughter of the Sayyidul Qabila. She was the daughter of her tribe's chief. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam made an offer that I can help you. If you want, you can get married. You can marry me. And she agreed. She gave her consent that yes, I will marry Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam paid her Badrul Kitaba. She was free right at that time, and she got married to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam with her consent. So concubinage is there, but there are more to it. There are more rulings to it. So we just, people say, oh, Islam believes in concubinage and therefore it is evil. If you don't know the whole story, then yes, it looks bad, but it is not if you don't ignore the rulings.
A follow-up question to this. So, isn't there ikhtilaf on the point whether, to take them up on the offer, whether it's fard or whether it's just on the ala sabil istihbab?
Yes, some Sahaba.
And historically also, did people consider it fard?
Some Sahaba believe that fakatibuhum is for istihbab. It is mustahab. But I believe it was Ibn Umar or Umar, radiyallahu anhuma, one of them. I have to double check. They said that fakatibuhum is for wujub. It is wajib that you offer them to be mukatab. So there are both opinions in the Islamic faith. Yes.
Okay, inshallah. So we have
one question.
Yes,
One question and then we'll let people make questions.
inshallah. We'll take one last question and then we'll let people go for wudu. And if anyone needs to go for wudu from now, they can go. Inshallah.
So I think this is a question a lot of college students and also people in the workplace run into. I mean, for me personally, whenever I'm at work, they see a beard, they know this guy knows something about Islam, they ask this question. And usually like LGBT people would target Muslims and ask this question, which is, why are you guys so considered what I do with my life and what I do behind closed doors? I'm not harming you in any way. So why are you so obsessed with taking away my human right?
So the question is that a lot of people, liberals, they ask that, why are you guys so concerned with what I do in my personal life? Whatever I do in my house, or something I do personally that doesn't harm you, why does that concern you?
Did you ever tell them that no, we're not concerned of what you do behind the doors? We're concerned because you impose your values on us, on our children, through your school curriculum, and you want to, even today, in the World Cup, FIFA World Cup in Qatar, the whole world is going crazy because they want to exercise their rights by supporting LGBT movement. So is that behind the doors? Is that closed room? I mean, this is one of the biggest events in the world, and you guys are, your planning is that you promote LGBT there in a Muslim country, going against the law of the land. So on one side we say, oh, respect the law of the land, but when you land in Qatar, no law of the land. It is only your law. It is only your superior thought. So this is double standard. So you ask them questions in return. Don't be apologetic. You ask them, how come you force churches and synagogues to have rainbow banner outside? What is this? Why are you forcing businesses against discrimination, or for discrimination that they cannot discriminate you? If this is something that you do only in your bedroom and you don't exercise it outside, why do you have to even identify yourself as gays and lesbians? The fact that you're identifying yourself as gays and lesbians, it means you want to do it, you want to exercise it in public domain. You ask this question, that there are normal people, straight people, majority of them, who are married, they sleep with their wife. It's a normal thing. Do they say that, oh, I identify myself as someone who sleeps with his wife? What is this? So why do you have to identify yourself as someone who sleeps with a man or with a woman? It's not something that you should be proud of. It is just a normal thing. This is what you ask these questions. These are the tough questions. They would never be able to respond.
And even, I remember someone mentioned a very good point, I think it was Muhammad Hijab, that even the term coming out of the closet, why is that something which is better? Because Islam, even halal relationships, any form of expression of love, that's within the, even not in front of your children, it's within...
it's in the closet.
It's in the closet, yeah. So why, even for things we consider legitimate, we consider that better within the closet. Forget about illegitimate. So inshallah, subhanAllah, we have like 21 questions here. And I think the audience is not... Yeah, the audience is also filled with questions. We'll also have another question and answer session after the program, and hopefully we can have some time to delay Isha, inshallah. So then, inshallah, we'll have a bit longer session there. Jazakumullah.
Inshallah, also, especially a lot of these questions are going to start coming in, and they're important questions. Join the Project Ihya community on WhatsApp. A lot of these questions can be entertained. Questions will be provided, and other conferences and programs will be announced. Platforms will be made, inshallah, for you to pose your questions and get your answers as well, inshallah. So stay in touch and link up with the Project Ihya, inshallah. Hopefully, we could. It will be beneficial in that campaign as well.
And the URL to join the WhatsApp group is whatsapp.projectihya.com. So it's very easy. whatsapp.projectihya.com, and it will take you directly to the join link. Jazakumullah khairan, we'll have a few minutes for